This is Blackstone Joe, and you're listening to Slick Talk.
If I say I'm an oil man, you will agree.
There's the stink of oil about you.
Hello and welcome to Slick Talk. I'm your host, Blackstone Joe, and I'm glad you're here. Today I am joined by Augustia. She is a fellow senior analyst, now reoccurring guest. And I wanted to hang out with Augustia because I've been working this idea in my mind about the overlap between theater, something that the two of us are very into, and oil analysis, the reports that we write every day. And here's the thing, when we write an oil report, we try and relate the results in a manner that is not strictly scientific because we want to give you context and relate it to you in a way that is not so textbook as much as it is communicate in a lay person's language, because gaining an understanding of oil and all you can learn from it, that really changes when you're able to adapt and use an analogy that helps communicate the severity of the situation, the reality of the findings. Using a good analogy can really be the difference in helping someone not only understand an oil report, but want to have another one and continue to build trends and learn all that you can with the testing that we do here at Blackstone. So, long way of saying theater is one way in which Augustia and I can communicate the wide world of oil analysis, or at least relate it to our personal experiences. And in the process of going through yet another rehearsal schedule, something I do quite a bit outside the office, I was just compiling all these examples of theater tropes, cliches, scenarios, and thinking, oh, that's kind of like when we help someone with a report and they're in a situation where the engine has a problem, or, what to do next, and et cetera, et cetera. So even if you are someone who is new to the world of theater, maybe you're new to the world of oil analysis, I think this episode is an interesting journey where you can see how we try and combine our interests, or what we are known for outside of work, and help give you a report that not only gives you the facts, but relays them in an interesting way that is unique to us. So without further ado, here is Augustia and I in studio. So, in the interest of never letting a good analogy go to waste, I have been in the midst of curating content ideas while doing a rehearsal schedule for a show. And I got to thinking about all the ways that theater situations, cliches, and tropes overlap with oil analysis scenarios. And I thought, who better to hang out with and unpack these scenarios? Because while it does seem very niche for an already niche topic like oil analysis, we are nevertheless tasked with relating it to whatever context we can relate to. And as two community theater actors turned report writers, I thought we might as well unpack this crossover and how theater and oil analysis, the interactions between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like even just what we've already kind of prepped for this one, there's a lot more than I thought there would be.
Mm-hmm. And I figured, since a lot of our listeners are probably unfamiliar with the elements that go into putting a production on, we might want to lay some foundations. So what would you say are the key ingredients, or I guess the necessary ingredients in a production? What's required to put a show on?
Yeah, well, you definitely have to have rehearsals.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just show up and hope for it to come together. Actors, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta have lighting. You have to see your actors on stage. You have to put them in something. So we're talking costuming,
Mm-hmm.
set.
Crew as well, which sometimes can just be the actors, depending on the situation.
Yeah, sometimes, especially in community theater, I feel like there's a lot of when you're not on stage, you're still definitely making things happen.
Yeah, because community theater, I don't think people really appreciate how volunteer-oriented it is.
Oh, so volunteer heavy. How many people get paid in a community theater show? Not many.
I would love to meet one and find out if we can do something together.
What is it? Maybe the director, and then you pay the venue for the privilege of using the space.
Yep, that's part of the deal too. And I think that unfortunately people will think that just due to it being volunteer community theater, that it's somehow like a lesser than product.
Oh yeah, unskilled. These people don't know what they're doing. I don't know if I'm gonna pay $50 for that.
It's very skilled, and also I think the fact that it is volunteer tells you a lot about the passion involved. People showing up after work to do this, and that's what you and I like to do after work sometimes is put on a show. So I wanted to take some of these elements we just established and break down the connections to oil analysis because as we recently learned, they are there. So one by one, we'll take one of these concepts of theater, what it takes to put a show on, and delve into the oil analysis version of that. So we talked about rehearsals. You need to rehearse, or hopefully you do end up rehearsing, barring some crazy instances like a illness running rampant through the cast or something. You are going to be in a room with other actors, but what would you say is a good oil analysis equivalent to that?
Well, rehearsals kind of happen as a precursor to the real deal, right? So I think that in our world here as analysts, that's kind of similar to the break-in period.
Yes.
Because even in a rehearsal, right, you have all these people coming together. Some of them might not know each other from Adam, and you have to make something happen. And that's kind of what's happening inside an engine, right? You've got the bearings from this one factory, and you bring in a crankshaft from over there, and you put it all together, and it's going to work, hopefully.
And rarely, I think, there are, exceptions to every situation, but just like how a wear-in sample isn't how that engine is likely going to look later on, your show is going to change over the course of a rehearsal schedule. At least it should, right?
Absolutely, yeah. The ideas you come in with as an actor are going to be changed by the director's vision for the show, what other actors are bringing to the table. Maybe your scene partner has a really good motive that completely changes what you were thinking about it when you read the script. So yeah, the final production almost always looks a lot different than that, especially like that first read through.
And I think that you can even layer that a bit more by talking about like the different stages of rehearsal. Like you have your introductory period, you're just blocking, which is finding out where you're going to end up on stage. But then you have your tech rehearsals. And I think that similar to oil analysis, where you have your introductory wear-in stage, but then if you apply modifications or you want to, whether it's a tune, you're adding horsepower or something like that, it's kind of like when you add in the costumes and the effects, the sound, the lights, because then you kind of have a new break-in period, right?
Yeah, and I mean, even thinking about like when you change how you're running an engine, maybe you do a whole lot more idling on one interval than the last. That could be similar to adding in those elements as you get closer to the actual final show, where it's going to make things look a little different, and that's not necessarily a problem. It's just something to get adjusted to. Yeah,
the adjustment periods happen throughout an engine's life, just like in a production schedule. Like, I just had a very real one happen to me where it's funny, the director had just given us during the curtain speech where we huddle up before we go on. It was opening night, and the director told us, hey, there's going to be the temptation to change things because you'll feel different energy. There will be maybe laughs you didn't expect, and you might want to keep playing into that. Like, don't change what you are doing right now. It's not going to work. And guess what happened? We're at the post-show dinner, and she goes, you know what? I think you might be able to do that monologue a little bit more this way. I agreed. So naturally, there is yet another, area of growth, I would say improvement, and similar to how you think your engine has settled in, and then you proceed to ask it to do different things, or there can be problems that come along you have to address, meaning just like your show has life, so does the engine, and acknowledging those patterns and the changes and adapting to them. That's all very real thing that these two worlds have in common, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So moving on from rehearsals, I wanted to ask, I guess this isn't necessarily theater specific. It really applies to any showbiz, what have you, but the diva of the engine, just like a show has a diva, or can, often they do, even in community, well, especially in community theater.
Yeah.
What would you say in oil analysis is the diva of an oil report, or what can be?
I mean, I do think that one can vary depending on the situation, right? It's probably going to be something showing up that you're not expecting, or sticking around for a while, making a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think since we're talking rehearsals and break-in,
Yeah.
Copper is definitely the diva for the very first part of an engine's life.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't go away.
Especially in like a newer, like a 6.6 Duramax to be specific. Not only does it start off high, and then it can decrease as wear in and oxides are washing out. I think what's funny is just like a diva in a show, you think things are good. You think we've settled in. And then lo and behold, a situation arises and copper will just spike 3 or 4 oil changes in. And
says,
then,
wait, hold on. Hold on. You remember me? I'm still the most important.
It's very much like a good theater example I have is we were getting into costume. We're figuring that part out. And this one actress just decides that none of the costumes that have been chosen for her are options, not one. She goes, this is just really not matching my vision for the character. And this is after we had gone through tons of stages of development of, I don't like the blocking choices you're making. I don't like this or that, the other. And we are cruising into Tech Week, and then you have this flare up with costumes. And it's just much like Copper. It can start off high and then suddenly make its presence known once again. So
Yeah. I think we see that a lot in marine applications too.
mm-hmm.
And also in transmissions, copper and lead. A lot of times we'll see those just pop up out of nowhere, usually from oxides, but it throws a wrench in things.
Yeah.
On both ends, for us as analysts and for our customers receiving these reports going, now hold on, that does not look normal. Should I be worried? Definitely diva elements right there.
Yeah. And sticking on wear metals, I think, it can all be so model specific, but, we look at transmission samples too. We look at marine transmissions like a twin disc, and those just have a ton of lead usually. And it's harmless oxides, but nevertheless, it's hard not to see that level, I think. As a new analyst or as a new customer who's not familiar with any of this, you see that and you're like, this must be a thing. It's like, no, it's just having a diva moment, and it may stay high, it may go away, but it's making its presence known, that's for sure. So moving on, I want to talk about dropped lines / misplaced props. These are things that in the moment of a rehearsal or, God forbid, a performance, I would say it's a skill knowing how to navigate that when those situations come up. Sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you just need to step in when you can. But these situations, whether it's an actor forgetting a line on stage or not having their prop, it reminded me of increases in wear that are not necessarily off the charts scary, but they happen. And just like in theater, where you can't really accuse someone of being like a problem just because they dropped one line or they forgot their prop on one go. You need to wait for it to really be a trend sometimes before you make too much of it. What kind of comes to your mind as a equivalent to a dropped line, a misplaced prop in oil analysis?
Yeah, kind of, I guess a little bit going back to those temporary increases in wear shortly after break-in or when you change something up with how you're running an engine.
Mm-hmm.
A slight increase here and there, a couple parts per million of iron or...
That or even just slight changes in oil consumption, maybe?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because oil consumption is something that can also vary quite a bit with how you're running an engine. You go to a track for a day of fun, and run it really hard, it's gonna drink some oil. And that's fine. That's normal. It's to be expected. It's not that it becomes a problem until you're seeing it start to form a pattern and a worsening kind of picture of that. And I think that similar to in the rehearsal process, right? If I biff a line once, it happens. Something on the other side of the room distracted me, and oh man, I totally had that line yesterday. I'll do better. But if I come in and there is one scene that I just can never get through without calling for a line, that's a problem, and my director's probably going to pull me aside. Hopefully will pull me aside instead of reaming me in front of the entire cast. But, you know, it takes more than one mistake in a theater setting to earn a reprimand, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing with your engine. It takes more than one unusual reading, usually, to be able to say, yes, this is a problem.
Yeah, because I think it would be wrong to suggest a real change to your process if that hasn't become a trend. Because, you know, if you see the same actor not be able to get the same line down time and again, then it might be worth asking them, how are you working this? How are you approaching memorization? What is, you know, maybe there's something we need to tweak there. And similar to an engine, when you see that slight increase here or there, I normally don't tell them to change what they're doing with their maintenance plan. Like, a slight increase doesn't mean you need to drastically change your interval or suddenly treat the motor differently. It's something that I need to see again, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, and I mean, there are even some times where we'll see some slight increases from customers who want to run longer intervals, and we'll still recommend or, still make an allowance for a longer run because it really just doesn't look like a problem.
Yeah.
Maybe aluminum is at average instead of half average like it's always been. It's something we'll keep an eye on, but not a reason to cut back.
Along the lines of misplaced props, dropped lines, do you have any shows in particular you remember where the lines were very tough, or do you have a favorite prop from a previous show?
Yeah. I think both of those are honestly probably from the same show. So in college, I did Silent Sky, which is a magnificent play by Lauren Gunderson about, I think we've maybe even talked about this before, because I just adore this play. But it's about some of the first women who were astronomers way back in the day, 1800s. Anyway, so the character I was playing was on stage for the entire show. There was, I think, half a page of the script that I didn't have any dialogue on, but I was still on stage.
Yeah.
I was just like tucked over in a corner. So that one was just a beast because
were
there
you
was
having to do
so
like
much.
business, or were you like frozen for that stretch of time?
That one, I was like, I think I was like taking a nap in a file room.
Okay, that's
it was
good.
like pulling long nights or whatever at the lab.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we don't have to do that here.
Amen. Yeah, that's tough when you have to, do some business that's not a distraction, but you need to be alive in the scene. And that's something that like I've had to go through with this show, is learning how to be active in a non distracting manner. Yeah. And I kind of liken that to when we tell someone that there is an increase to monitor, but it's too early to assume anything. You kind of just have to keep doing what you're doing, and then we'll learn more. It's like telling an actor with no lines, like, just continue. And
live in the scene. We'll get back to you.
Yeah.
That's also tricky, though, as an actor, because you have to be living in it, but not to the point where you'll miss your cue line. Have you ever had a moment where you've been so involved in something that you missed your entrance?
The toughest thing for me to navigate is when we have to yap on stage. We have to just ad lib, and you're encouraged to keep up a certain amount of energy, just ad libs. Like, this happens a lot in scene transitions, when you're coming on with a group and you're supposed to just be chatting. I have forgotten whole cues just because I'm thinking of the best ad libs possible.
No.
And fortunately, as with other scenarios we've discussed previously in this episode, we were able to iron those out over time. And these are temporary fluctuations that did not turn into any long-standing problem. But moving on, I want to talk about the oil analysis equivalent to costuming and how you think of a possible connection between that and what we do with used oil. Or how, I don't know, not even what we do. I think you can relate it to oil in general, whether it's at the stage when they're buying it, the customer that is. When it comes to costuming and oil analysis, something that came to mind for me was branding and how people will often make decisions based on labels and the brand and the blend. But just like the brand is not everything, a good costume is not everything. I think there's a value there. I'm not saying costumes don't matter, but I think you can see a very similar amount of situations where a good costume didn't make the performance and a bad costume didn't break it, and vice versa. Like it's an ingredient that matters, but you can't make a mountain out of it, basically. I think from an acting standpoint. How do you see it?
Yeah. I think that makes sense. And also, from an acting standpoint specifically, you might not love your costume, and it's still getting the job done.
Mm-hmm. So just like a customer saying, can I really run Kirkland oil?
Right. Absolutely, you can. It's not the prettiest, maybe, the packaging isn't as fancy as something like a royal purple.
Yeah.
I love royal purple. It's not even, it's oil. It's just oil.
Yeah.
It goes in the car. It helps it run, all that. I just think they're fun. I don't use it in my car, but I have respect for them as a brand.
They look good. They know how to sell. So I totally understand that. Yeah, I think when it comes to costumes, like I've always appreciated their effect, but I've never had a costume save me from, doom. It's like,
oh yeah. If you don't have your lines memorized, the costume's not doing anything to help you there. If you can't sell your character, the costume's not going to do it for you. It can help once you're at that point. It can for sure help. And I think honestly, maybe that ties in a little bit more closely with what we see from additives, from the aftermarket stuff.
mm-hmm.
Because on our end, right, most of the time it doesn't make a difference. But we get a lot of customers saying that, oh, I tried this one that's supposed to quiet lifter tick or is supposed to improve my gas mileage. And all I can really say is like, okay, awesome.
Yeah.
That's great, because a lot of those don't claim benefits that we can see.
Yeah.
It is all that operational stuff. And if it works, great. It's not hurting anything, but we also aren't going to say, oh yeah, you should go buy these 5 and you'll have the best engine on the planet.
Uh-huh. I also liken it to those scenarios where someone might have, say, a known problem, a coolant leak, the engine is clearly making just abnormal amounts of metal. The oil brand or blend's not saving it. And if you have a show where, like you were mentioning earlier, none of the actors know their lines, or you don't have tech, you don't have a stage. Like, if that production does not have the necessary ingredients, the costumes won't be the difference. But I do appreciate their impactfulness in other ways. I think there are like aspects of brands or blends that really matter. And similarly, costumes can give you that little special something that you're looking for. Like when it comes to a brand or blend, I want one that doesn't use sodium, so that way I have no gray area about where it's coming from. And similarly, maybe a great costume gives me this added confidence. I think that's a good way to think about it. It can add a certain layer of confidence to what you're doing and the choices you're making. But yeah, it's never the whole shebang.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something special about the first rehearsal in costume where it kind of feels like it pulls everything together, all of the work that you've been doing. And I think that can be kind of the icing on the cake situation.
Especially if it's a show that is a period piece in any sort of way.
Oh, absolutely.
The reality that it inserts, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, you know what? The affectation I've been putting on my voice, the way I'm carrying myself, now it all feels legitimate.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I can walk as if I'm wearing a corset for 3 months of rehearsal, but it really dials in when I'm wearing that garment or
Yep.
or when I have the hip rolls on for the big floofy skirt. It makes a difference. It does.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I am probably one of these people guilty of doing this. Maybe you are too. I don't know. Actors that chew the scenery and just seeing
I'm
this
sorry.
happen.
Chew the scenery?
Yeah.
Like just like literally take a bite out of it.
No, I mean, not literally.
Put your teeth on it.
It more so you are really digging into that performance and you are trying to be the belle of the ball.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
so not a literal gnawing, although, I mean, I've had to, like, eat food off the stage before. That's kind of like chewing
off
the scenery.
The stage floor?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a show where a character threw some bread on the stage, and I'm supposed to walk in and be like, "Oh, what's this?" And then I eat it. And that is quite literally chewing the scenery. But no.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, it was a lot.
How'd it taste?
It was store brand sourdough, so it could be worse.
Yeah, yeah.
There
could be worse things to eat off of a stage.
Oh my goodness. I have eaten cold SpaghettiOs. I've drank a lot of black tea that has been sitting in the theater for who knows how long.
Hours.
Because for the uninitiated, black tea is typically your liquor. I always prefer that over like apple juice or anything really sugary. But when it comes to chewing the scenery, I think of actors who want to be big. And the worst part is when they are doing this and act like they don't know that they're doing it. I think in oil analysis, you can see this manifest, especially with additives, because some additives just jump off the page. And, it's not a problem like it can be in theater when someone wants to be the center of attention. But additives can really steal the show if you're someone who doesn't know what to look for in a report. Like I'm thinking of arch oil, for example.
Yeah, arch oil, definitely.
Doesn't hurt anything.
No, but it does upstage the entire rest of the report.
Yes.
You get that, 1,000 parts per million of potassium.
And boron, little pinch of sodium.
Just a little, as a treat, just in case you were confident it wasn't coolant. And then they throw that in there. So
that is definitely like a scene stealer. And I think so often when I talk about, these overlaps, scene stealing, I think we, the analysts, know that this isn't the focus, but we always have to put ourselves in the position of the uninitiated, the people who might be looking at a report for the first time. Just like an audience member can see a show and they don't know necessarily what was a mistake or not by the actor or the production. Like how many times during a run of a show have you made an error that you is technically, you waited a half step too long to make an entrance. You maybe were a beat slow or fast on line delivery. And in your head, you're just killing yourself being like, the audience clearly knows that I
and
messed
then
up.
Somebody comes up to you afterwards and says, "Oh, I loved that part where you did the mistake."
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you always have to wrestle with your own mind about what they know versus what they don't. And it just reminds me a lot about the emails and the phone calls where people can either think we overlooked an additive level or something like that, when in reality, it wasn't part of our show because we were seeing everything else. I think those situations really have a lot in common for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. The amount of times I get an email where it's, "Hey, I noticed that between these two samples, this one and the one I sent last year, there was a big increase in boron."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, there was.
And we might talk about it if we have space.
If we have space, but a lot of times we don't, especially when it's a situation where they wouldn't know that it's not a big deal, because those are usually our first-time customers, and we're explaining what universal averages are. What the heck are insolubles? Where do those come from?
Yeah.
Which are more important things, and we know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking at a report for the first time, it's not super clear. And so it's something that I do think kind of falls through the cracks sometimes with the additives, is because we know that it's not a problem at all for those to change. But boy, sometimes they change a lot.
Yeah. I think an audience might go see a show and see someone playing a role like really big and assume that that's the only way to do it or that's how it always is. And not necessarily, just like how, a customer can look at averages and think that's always how it is.
Yeah, I think that I really love to go watch movies. And a lot of times I'll see a movie and go, oh my goodness, that casting was so good.
Yeah.
Nobody else could have played that role.
Yeah.
Then I go, well, no, they could have. That is how acting works. But they do it so well that as an audience member, I'm captivated by that performance and they take me along with them and they've got me there. And yeah, so I think that kind of ties into, what are we talking about?
Talking about chewing the scenery, but now I want to shift gears though to the concept of precasting, which is something that all actors unfortunately
have opinions about.
We eventually become aware of it, and no one loves it unless you get the call, in which case we're always going to do it. But we're always going to accept the role, except for very rare exceptions that I have not been a part of. But do you have an oil analysis equivalent of precasting? Because for me, I think of assumptions on the owner's end that are informed by general knowledge. So precasting to me, where, just to clarify, that is when a director casts a show without holding auditions. I think of that in an oil-related way as someone doing a 3,000-mile interval or changing the oil every year just because it is a programmed choice. Just like someone's inclined to choose like their friends for a show or only people they've worked with before. I think often owners precast their maintenance plan to some extent of just adopting the conventional wisdom. Do you think that's like a good comparison, or how do you think those might play?
No, I think that is a good comparison, right? Because you do go with what you're familiar with, and that is, in most cases, what precasting is like. People you work well with, people can take your direction. But I was also thinking maybe, again, with newer customers and trying to compare to universal averages, we've set them up so they know this column is my results and that one all the way over there is what this should look like.
Yeah.
And with that preconceived notion there, a lot of times you'll get people with shorter intervals than average going, oh, well, I ran half as long and my aluminum is already at that level. I should be worried about this, right?
Yeah.
So I think really precasting is maybe anything that we have to talk a customer down from.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, because I mean there is a negotiation, I think, between their understanding, meeting them where they're at, us knowing what we do, and then, trying to acknowledge, validate their point of view, but also be like, hey, there's this other actor that you haven't worked with before. Maybe let's open up auditions and give them a shot, instead of just continuously doing what you're used to. There's a benefit to that. I think people end up finding out that their engine, their oil can go a lot longer than they thought between oil changes. And I think sometimes directors get into that sort of, tunnel vision where they've kind of lost sight of that. So this is a very stray example / scenario that I thought of, but a director asking you to do a role that you are not familiar with. Have you ever accepted or been casted in a show where you just didn't know much, if anything, about it, but you just wanted to be in a show. You wanted to be part of it, so you ended up taking the leap? Have you ever been in that spot?
Honestly, I think that's a lot of the shows I've done. I haven't always been someone who reads shows just for fun, or especially with musicals. This is controversial for anyone listening who's really into theater. I don't really like listening to albums for shows that are not sung through all the way.
Okay.
Because I feel like you miss out so much by not having the book. So we did a production of Big Fish when I was in college. Super fun show. I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Okay.
It's very magical realism, which I think, theater is magical realism
right.
to some extent. But this one kind of takes it a little further. But yeah, not something I knew what I was getting myself into. And with that one specifically, I was asked to assistant direct that show.
As well as be in it.
As well as be in it. And I had a very minor role, but I was upset about that before I got the offer to assistant direct, because I was like, I'm a senior and I'm good. Not just some like, I deserve it. I like to think of myself as someone who knows what I'm doing on a stage.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty upset when I saw the cast list come out. I was like, what do you mean I'm mayor and ensemble? That's nothing.
Yeah.
And then got a call from the director, and he asked me if I wanted to assistant direct and do a scene or two all by myself. And I said, oh, wow. Yeah, well, I would love to. That's not what I was expecting from this experience, but it turned out to be something I really enjoyed.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think of this scenario as the equivalent to when we, the analyst, have to work on a report where there's a blank slip and we're just kind of diving in and we may have a handle on it. Then we get more information and that might shift our point of view. We thought it was, obviously engine oil, but then it might be one of those strange transmission oils that bears a lot of similarity to an engine oil, or, there's such a vast array of gear lubes and hydraulic oils and all that. And your understanding changes, your evaluation shifts as you become more familiar with what you're looking at. And that relates to, there's been a couple of scripts that I didn't even read. And a couple of them, I thought that I knew exactly what I was getting into. Did not know in this show that I'm currently in now, you're going to sing a cappella. There's going to be a little dance number. There's going to be
dance number. Okay.
Don't worry about it. So I knew a baseline I had a baseline understanding of what I was getting into. And that shifts a lot, just like when you're looking at a blank slip, which comes up pretty often around the world of report writing.
Yeah. And I do think, as we get more experienced as analysts, it is a little easier to pick up on, this is probably a sample from something like this. And it gives you a nice starting point. But yeah, there's a lot of context that we end up missing there. And it almost always comes back as an amended report where, we have to obviously fill out some clerical information that we missed. But sometimes it does drastically change our understanding of what those numbers mean. And I think that's maybe something people wouldn't expect from this type of work, that context is so important to our understanding of whether something is good or bad. Because maybe one engine model naturally makes twice as much copper as most other ones, and that's totally fine. But if we don't know that it's that engine, it's going to look a little bit more cautionary starting out.
Yeah. And I think similar to that, you may have an understanding of a show. Say you've heard about a show, maybe you've even done a show previously, but then you do it again with a different director, or you read the play, you figured, all right, I know what the energy is going to be. And then you work with a director that has a totally different vision. And then you're like, this isn't what I thought. Okay. And then you adapt to that. And then hopefully you build a good trend. And then by the time curtain goes up, you're ready to roll. So, well, I think that brings my list of examples comparing the world of theater to the world of oil analysis. But I've had a good time. And I think that this is just a good example, letting the listeners know how we try and apply, what we do to explaining results, because the more context, the more we can relate to everyday life, the better the report. Thank you so much for hanging out, Augustia.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joe.
All right, I hope you enjoyed listening to Augustia and I in studio breaking down all the ways in which theater can remind us of oil analysis and vice versa. Always love having a reoccurring guest on the show. I hope you all enjoyed our chat today. And if you haven't already, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. This is Blackstone Joe signing off.
The Slick Talk podcast is powered by Blackstone Laboratories. If you're ready to start your oil analysis journey, visit blackstone-labs.com to order your free test kit.
That is finally the marriage of oil and theater that we have been waiting for.
At long last. You know, everybody wanted that. That is not just for the two of us.
I'm definitely going to have Arryn keep that blooper, and everybody wanted that.